Okay, so let's cultivate our motivation. And we're still alive, almost miraculously, again this week. But we don't know how long our life is going to be. And when it comes time to leave this body, it's our craving and grasping and karma that are going to propel us into the next life very strongly. And if we want to have a good life, then we have to create the causes now and prepare for death. But just doing that and abandoning the negative actions and creating positive ones isn't sufficient, because we're still stuck in cyclic existence, going up and down on this merry-go-round of rebirth, endlessly, beginninglessly. So when we get tired of doing this, then we give up seeking pleasure in cyclic existence and aim for nirvana. And that too, although noble, is still limited, because what about everybody else? All these sentient beings who've been kind to us in previous lives and this life, and who will continue to be kind to us. And so we can't ignore others and just look for our own spiritual liberation. And so let's generate that wish to attain full enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. So last week, I just want to correct something I said. I said that we don't innately grasp the self and the aggregates to be one, and we don't innately grasp them to be completely separate. That's right. The example I gave, I just want to clarify the examples. We don't grasp the aggregates to be, and the person to be inherently one, because sometimes we think, oh gee, I wish I could change bodies with that person. I wish I had their mind. Okay, we say things like that, so that shows that on an innate level, we're not seeing the aggregates and the self to be completely inherently one. Because if we did see them that way, we wouldn't think of, oh, I could change bodies or change minds with somebody else. Also, we don't see the aggregates and the self as inherently separate, because if we did that, we would see them as totally unrelated. But we don't, because when our stomach hurts, we say, I feel uncomfortable, or I'm sick. Okay? So the reason that this topic comes up is because we're trying to identify the object of negation in the emptiness meditation. And it's not, that the aggregates and the self are inherently one. And it's not that the aggregates and the self are inherently different, because we don't grasp them innately to exist that way. What the innate self-grasping is we think that there's a person there that does not depend on being merely labeled by term and concept. Okay, that's one way to talk about the object of negation. Another way is that there's a person that's blended in with the aggregates, an inherently existent person that's blended in with the aggregates, but not seen as inherently one or inherently separate, but somehow able to set itself up, but existing somewhere inside the aggregates, inside the body and mind. Okay? So that's the object of the innate grasping at true existence. And that's the object that we think exists, but does not exist in terms of the selflessness of the person. Okay? So I just wanted to clarify that from before. Now, there's the question sometimes comes up, are we always consistently grasping at true existence? Do all of our consciousnesses grasp at true existence, even as ordinary beings? The answer to that is no. Okay? Now, it's true that for ordinary beings, all of our consciousnesses have the appearance of true existence. And for all sentient beings, except Aryas in meditative equipoise on emptiness, all other consciousnesses of sentient beings have the appearance of true existence. But in terms of grasping a true existence, not all of our consciousnesses grasp at true existence. So there's three ways that there is of apprehending objects, and we'll go through them and then see which ones ordinary beings have, which ones Aryas have, which ones liberated beings have. Okay, so the first way of apprehending things is as truly existent. So we see them there, out there, able to set themselves up, existing under their own power, having their own nature, their own essence, their own entity, totally independent from consciousness. Okay? So that's the first way. The second way is apprehending things as false. Okay? So this could be either seeing things as empty of true existence, or it could be seeing things as being like illusions, in that they appear one way but exist another way. So that's the second way of apprehending. Third way of apprehending is neither. You're not grasping at true existence, but you're not also apprehending them as like an illusion, and you're not apprehending them as empty either. Okay, so neither of the above. You're just merely apprehending them as existing in general. Okay, so consciousnesses which grasp at true existence, these are ones like when we get angry or something like that, we're holding the object, apprehending it, grasping it to exist truly. Yeah? So we ordinary beings definitely have that one. Okay? Apprehending it in a false way or as non-truly existent, ordinary beings who have not realized emptiness directly and can apprehend things as being like an illusion when they have an inferential cognition of emptiness, an inferential realization of emptiness. And of course, Aryas who have direct insight into emptiness, they can see things as empty or as illusion-like. And then the third way, as neither, yeah, again, everybody kind of can see them as neither apprehend them as neither inherently existent or as empty or like an illusion. So this could be many of our ordinary consciousnesses when we say, I'm walking down the street, you know, I'm going to go sweep the floor, these kinds of things, at that point we aren't grasping at the self as truly existent. Yeah? There's no energy around it, is there? There's no, you're not holding that there's a solid self. It's just, I'm walking, I'm sweeping the floor. Yeah? So this is important because we have to see that not all of our consciousnesses are erroneous in the sense of grasping at true existence. Even though for sentient beings who aren't in meditative equipoise and emptiness, all of our consciousnesses are mistaken in the sense that true existence appears to them. So it's possible for true existence to appear to a consciousness, but that consciousness doesn't grasp it as existing truly. So for example, our sense consciousnesses, they don't grasp true existence. It's only the mental consciousness that does. But things appear truly existent to the sense consciousnesses. When you see yellow, it's like, yeah, yellow's out there. It has its own nature. Okay, so it's the appearance of true existence, but it's a conceptual mind actually that's apprehending true existence, and since sense consciousnesses are not conceptual minds, you know, they don't apprehend true existence. Okay, so, so we were saying that ordinary beings who have not realized emptiness directly can apprehend the self or other phenomena in the first and the third ways, okay? And ordinary sentient beings who have realized emptiness inferentially can also see it in the second way. Okay, so the point is that not all minds of sentient beings perceive or grasp at true existence, and also not all conceptual consciousnesses of sentient beings grasp at true existence. Because you can have a conceptual consciousness that's just, you know, thinking about the tree, you know, and you're not necessarily grasping at the inherent existence of that tree when you're thinking about it, although the tree does appear inherently existent to you. Okay, and so similarly, somebody who is not grasping at true existence is not necessarily apprehending something as empty, because it's not just this dichotomy between apprehending emptiness of true existence and apprehending true existence, because there's this third way of apprehending it as neither. Okay? So, remember we were talking about some people who believe in blank-minded meditation, and they say all consciousnesses, you should get rid of all of them, you know, because they're all deluded, they're all the cause of suffering. And what the error they make is they think that all sentient beings' consciousnesses grasp true existence. In other words, they don't realize that there's the third way of apprehending things as neither truly existent nor as non-truly existent. Okay? So because they don't think that there's any way of just saying there's a fan there, you know, without having there be grasping at true existence all the time, for that reason they say, oh, all conceptual consciousness are grasping at true existence, so we should get rid of all of them, A to Z. And remember last time we talked about the faults of doing that if you do that, you could never even hear teachings on emptiness, because when you're hearing teachings on emptiness, you're using concepts. Yeah? And although it's true, you know, from the Madhyamaka viewpoint, at the end of the road, you want to let go of the concepts and perceive emptiness directly. There's no fault in using concepts at the beginning to try and understand the topic. Okay? Now, arhats, yeah, beings who are liberated from cyclic existence, they perceive things only in the second and third ways. They can perceive things as empty or as illusory, and they can perceive things as neither. But they no longer grasp, I should have used the word grasp there, not perceive, but they no longer grasp things as truly existent because they've gotten rid of all the self-grasping ignorance. So true existence still appears to them, but they don't grasp it. Okay. And similarly, all the cognizers of somebody who has realized emptiness don't necessarily see their objects as like illusion or as empty. You know, sometimes we have this idea that somebody has direct perception into emptiness, and then after that, ignorance is all gone, wrong, false appearance is all gone. You know, you can have direct insight into emptiness in meditative equipoise, but then in the break time, if you're not yet an arhat, if you haven't attained liberation and removed the afflictive obscurations yet, you still sometimes might have grasping at true existence when you're outside of your meditative equipoise on emptiness. And for those beings who have inferential realization of emptiness, but not direct realization, in their break times, when they're outside of their meditative equipoise, they may even have the grasping at true existence, the acquired grasping at true existence, I should say, because because remember, beings who have inferential understandings of emptiness, they're on the path of preparation, not the path of seeing, so they're not Aryas. So they may still at times have the acquired afflictions, like, and it wouldn't happen very often because they've meditated a lot, but they still may have, one of these gross kind of graspings at true existence that comes from a wrong philosophical view. And even after attaining the path of seeing and perceiving emptiness directly, you still may have, you still may grasp at true existence sometimes because of the habit that's there. Or in your post-meditation time, you may also have the third way of seeing things, which is neither truly existent nor non-truly existent. So as an Arya, what you want to cultivate is the second one in the break time, seeing things as like illusions. But sometimes you don't have that, and you just have it the third way as neither. Or sometimes, some innate self-grasping comes up, and you even have the first way. When you become an arhat, or if you're on the bodhisattva path, when you attain the 8th ground, then you've eliminated all the self-grasping ignorance, you've eliminated the afflictive obstructions, and so from that point onwards, you no longer have the grasping at true existence, whether you're in meditation or not, because you've eliminated that self-grasping ignorance. Okay? So this is important to know because, there's this book, what's it called? After the Ecstasy, the Laundry. And so there's a number of people in there who write about, these incredible experiences they have in meditation. And then later on, they kind of, go back and they're still fighting with people and still, unhappy and all this stuff. And you can see that in the West, we seem kind of surprised, It's like, wow, now whether all these people actually saw emptiness directly is another question. I'm not even going to deal with that, okay? But even if they did, that doesn't mean that afterwards you never have any grasping, or that all your bad habits are gone, because you still have the seeds of the afflictions in you until you attain either arhatship or the 8th bhumi. And so if we know this, then we're not going to get kind of wrapped up in, I just got to have this one experience and that's going to cure the whole thing, and then you're not going to crash later on by, oh, I thought I had this great realization of emptiness and I'm still, you know, getting upset. Okay? So there's many, many stages on this. And the wrong views are, you know, we're deeply habituated with them. And then in addition, you know, we always need to check up when we have spiritual experiences, if they're genuine ones or if they're just appearances to the mind. Yeah? So even people, you know, the great meditators who have a vision of one of the deities, you know, they always check up. Is it the actual deity or is it just the mind? Yeah? Or sometimes we might feel like we're leaving our body. Yeah? But leaving our body, that's not the definition of realizing emptiness. You know, feeling like you're disassociating from your body. Yeah, I mean, that's just letting go of the grasping at I am my body temporarily, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you've realized the emptiness of the self. Okay? So, you know, whenever we have these experiences, we should examine them and use them in a way that's useful, that energizes us in our path, but not latch onto them as truly existent experiences that we're going to try and recreate because it means that I'm getting somewhere. I'm realizing the emptiness of the I. You know, that's a little bit contradictory. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about the correct sense of self that we want to have, because there's a lot of misunderstanding about this too. You know, we hear that Buddhism teaches selflessness, so then we think, oh, there's no self. Yeah, there's no self. And then, but if there's no self, then how do you say I'm walking down the street? Yeah, you can't say that. Or people say there's no self, and they use it as a way of self-deprecation. Like, you know, I'm useless, I'm valueless, there's no me. Yeah. So they use it in a psychologically unhealthy way. These people haven't really had insights into selflessness, but they've just heard the words and misunderstood the words. And so they think, oh, there's no self, so why try and do anything, you know? There's no self. So that's not it. And His Holiness repeatedly emphasizes that as a bodhisattva, you have to have a very clear sense of self. Not some fuzzy sense of self. But this clear sense of self does not necessarily mean that you have self-grasping. Because he says, I mean, if you're a bodhisattva and you're making the determination to liberate all sentient beings from samsara by myself alone, yeah, that's a pretty big promise. Yeah, and you need to have a lot of self-confidence to make that promise. And you need to have a lot of feeling of oomph, of I can do it, you know, some joyous effort. Yes, yes, I can do this. Yeah, so that sense of self is a virtuous sense of self because it leads us to engage on the path. That sense of self it doesn't have to be grasping at true existence. It can be that third sense of self is, you know, seeing it as neither, or it could even be the second sense in the case of Aryas, seeing that self as illusory, but still having strong self-confidence in your ability to practice the path and attain the results. So don't think that realizing selflessness means you just kind of become like a worm, you know. No self. So I just sit here. I don't want anything. I don't prefer anything. Nothing. I don't exist. You know, I mean, do you think that's how a bodhisattva spends their time? You know, I've never seen His Holiness sit like that. You know? I mean, and if you look at the really great masters, you know, they have preferences. Yeah? You benefit sentient beings. You don't act negatively. There's preferences in there, okay? But there's no grasping an inherent existence in the preferences. There's no attachment to the preferences. So sometimes, you know, we make the error and we think that when we realize emptiness, then there's no discrimination at all. It's all nothing. Now, it's true, while you're in meditative equipoise on emptiness, there is no discrimination. And there's no good and no bad and no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body and mind. Because you're in the reflection on the ultimate nature, how things actually exist. But when you arise from that and you're functioning in the world, you still abide by worldly conventions and things still function. Yeah? And so there's a person who can still discriminate between orange and purple. There's a person who can discriminate between what to practice and what to abandon. So this discrimination can all occur, but without grasping at either one of the options as truly existent, and without attachment to one thing or the other. Okay? So when you're a highly realized being, you can speak very forcefully and directly, but you're not attached to your position. Okay? I know this is all incomprehensible to us, you know, because for us, when we speak forcefully and directly, we are attached. And that's my view, and don't you dare criticize it, because then you're saying that I'm bad. But for a bodhisattva, you know, people can criticize their views, you know, they don't take it personally, and they can still discriminate, you know, what to practice and what to abandon when they're out of meditative equipoise. When they're in meditative equipoise, there's no appearance of conventionalities at all. So none of that's going on. Okay? Makes some sense? Yeah? So this kind of stuff is important. Otherwise, it's so easy to get wrong ideas, you know? And we kind of develop our own spaced out theories of, you know, like either, oh, you have a glimpse, so you're fully enlightened and all the afflictions are gone. Sorry. Or, you know, you have a glimpse and there's no I, so I just sit there. You know, some kind of drug stupor. Yeah, wrong again. Okay? Okay. Now we're going to get into the juicy part, because now we're going to start the analytical process to see if things exist in the way that they appear. Okay? So it's very important to be able to identify the appearance of true existence. Yeah, to know what it is, and then to see if true existence exists or not. If we leave true existence alone and we negate something else, then we're not going to eliminate the ignorance. Okay? So we have to be able to identify the appearance of true existence and then think, if true existence existed in this way, this is how it would be. Okay. Yeah, because J. Rinpoche gives this great example of when you negate the wrong thing, you know, like you leave true existence all nice wrapped up with a bow on it, and you trash something else, you negate something else. He said it's like having a spirit in the West, but you offer the torma to the donkey in the East. You know, you're missing the mark. Yeah. Or what would be a good American example? You know one stock is soaring, so you buy the one that's crashing. We can get the stupidity of that, can't we? Yeah. Anything related to money, we get real well. Okay. And similarly, we don't just take emptiness on granted and say, the person is not inherently existent because the Buddha said so. Okay? Because that doesn't get us any realizations either. Does it? Yeah. I mean, it's better than grasping at true existence, but just saying, well, yeah, nothing inherently exists because the Buddha said so, doesn't mean that we've refuted the object of negation. Just means we have some strong belief, but we can sure have some very strong grasping at the same time. Okay? And so although our unimpaired worldly consciousnesses cannot perceive emptiness directly, they do have the capability to contradict certain premises when we analyze the ultimate nature. Okay? So, for example, we say the self is not truly existent because if it were, it would be permanent. Okay? So our regular, consciousnesses, conventional consciousnesses, can understand that the self isn't permanent, even though those consciousnesses cannot understand that the self is empty of true existence. Okay? Or cannot see true existence directly, I should say. Okay, so that's why we use syllogisms, we use consequences, things like this. A syllogism is like a proof. The self is empty of inherent existence because it's dependent arising. A consequence is showing somebody the wrong results that follow from their stating a certain thing, and that consequence undermines their own assertions. So they're kind of stuck. It's like, it's like if you say the self is not truly existent because if it were, it would be permanent. Well, the person knows that the self isn't permanent, but they also think the self is truly existent. And then when you're saying, but if it's truly existence, it's got to be permanent, then they go, and they see there's some contradiction there. So that's the use of consequences. Show somebody absurd consequences. Okay. So, when we cultivate the right view, we start with an example of something like a cart or a chariot, or in modern times a car. But when we actually do the meditation, they recommend that we meditate on the emptiness of the person, our own self first, because our self our I is dedicated in dependence upon the body and mind. So the thing that's dedicated is always, that's designated. Did I say dedicated? Oops. Okay. So the I is designated in dependence upon the body and mind, and the thing that is designated is always more unstable than the basis of designation. Okay? So the aggregates, the body and mind, are the basis of designation, and then the self, the I that's merely imputed in dependence upon them, is the designated object. So they recommend when you're meditating starting with that I, because they say it's easier to realize that emptiness than to start off trying to realize the emptiness of the body or the mind. So there's some quotes here from Nagarjuna and then some from the Pali Canon that we're going to get into. So Nagarjuna starts, and this is in the Precious Garland. If the person is not earth, not water, not fire, not wind, not space, not also consciousness, and not all of them together, where is the person outside of those? So you're looking for the person in the earth element of the body, the water element, the fire, the wind, the space elements. You can't find the person is any of those. Person is also not the consciousness. Okay, and it's also not the collection of all those things together. So where's the person outside of those? Can you find a person that's separate from those different elements? Then Nagarjuna continues, just as the person is not established in reality because of being designated independence upon an aggregation of the six constituents. Six constituents were earth, water, fire, space, air, consciousness. So each constituent also is not established in reality because of being designated independence upon an aggregation. So the self is dependent on these six elements. 5 of them were physical, earth, water, those ones, and then consciousness. The self is the designated object, and those 6 are the basis of designation. But if you take any of those constituents individually, it becomes a designated object that is designated on its own individual basis of designation. Okay? So consciousness is designated independence upon this accumulation, this collection of moments of clarity and awareness. Okay? Or earth is designated independence upon all these things that are hard and solid. Okay? So what we're getting at is something can be a basis of designation in one situation, and it can also be the designated object in another situation. Okay? So for example, the consciousness is part of the basis of designation of the self, but it itself is also an object that's designated in independence upon the collection of moments of clarity and awareness. Okay? And so in this way, you can see, for example, when you're negating the self, the truly existent self, you're not just negating the self, yeah, but you've also got to investigate each of the aggregates and see if they are truly existent. So in most practices, they say meditate on the emptiness of the self first and then the aggregates, but then sometimes in some practices, you'll find it reversed. Meditate on the emptiness of the aggregates first and then the self. Okay. But in terms of the example, we're starting out with the example of a self of phenomena, which is, in olden times, the chariot or the cart, but we're going to use a car. Okay, but let me read to you the quote that this starts with. And this is a very interesting quote because the Tibetans use it, and they just say, this quote is from a sutra in the fundamental vehicle. Well, I found this quote in the Pali Canon. Yeah, I'm using the translation here that the Tibetans have. I'm in the process of comparing the translations of this quote, to see if all the words are exactly the same. So I'm just using the translation from the Tibetan right now. And this quote was spoken by a bhikshuni. Bhikshuni Vajira. And so she was meditating, and Mara, you know, who is the personification of hindrances, appears to her and tries to, you know, sidetrack her meditation and, you know, get her back into worldly things. And Bhikshuni Vajira says to Mara, "Self is a demonic mind. You have a wrong view. These compositional aggregates are empty. There is no living being in them. Just as one speaks of a cart in dependence upon a collection of parts, so we use the convention living being in dependence upon the aggregates." Okay? So self is a demonic mind. So Mara here is being personified as the grasping at the self. Yeah. You have a wrong view. The compositional aggregates, in other words, form, which is the body, feelings, discriminations, conditioning factors, and consciousness, yeah, they're empty. So that's the selflessness of phenomena. She's saying that the aggregates are empty. And then she says, there is no living being in them. That one's the self of persons. Okay. And then she uses the example, just as one speaks of a cart, yeah, in dependence upon a collection of parts. If you've ever ridden in a cart in India, you know, you have the wooden reels and the, you know, all the different things in the cart. Or I haven't ridden in an Indian chariot. I guess those went out of style, but the cart stayed in style. Just as one speaks of a cart in dependence upon a collection of parts, so you have the back and the downside and the wheels and the axle and the front and the seat and all of those, that's a collection of parts. So we use the convention living being or self or person in dependence upon the aggregates. So in dependence upon the aggregates, we designate I, just as in dependence upon the collection of parts, you designate the cart. But when you look to try in the parts, you can't find the cart. And when you look in the aggregates, the body and mind, you can't find the person. Okay, so that's what's getting emphasized in here. Okay, so when Nagarjuna asked us to look at what's the relationship between the self and the aggregates, he gave 5 ways of checking this out to see that the self and the aggregates are not inherently, that the self is not the aggregates. And then Chandrakirti in his supplement added 2 more. So you get the 7-point negation. When we do the 4-point meditation on emptiness, yeah, remember the 4-point analysis? The first one is identifying the object of negation. The second one is establishing the pervasion. In other words, that if things did exist inherently, they should be either inherently one or inherently separate. There's no third alternative. Then the third one is that the self and the aggregates aren't inherently one, and the fourth is that they're not inherently different, and then the conclusion is that therefore there's no inherently existent person. Okay, that's the 4-point analysis of that. The 7 points that Chandrakirti teaches all boil down to the self is not inherently one with the aggregates, which is the 3rd point in the 4-point analysis, and the self is not inherently independent from the aggregates, which is the 4th point in the 4-point analysis. Okay? So what Chandrakirti is doing is he's just taking the 3rd and 4th points and expanding them, because in expanding them, he's getting us to, look a little deeper and dig a little deeper and see what exactly is the relationship between the aggregates, the body and mind on one hand, and the self, the person, on the other. Yeah, because our big problem is that we think that there's this independent person that's somewhere mixed inside the aggregates, that exists without depending on name and concept. And all beings have that, including kitties. No kitty down there tonight. Okay, so we're going to start with the example of a car, because you know, none of us are terribly attached to carts, are we? You know, or to wagons. It's not going to get you. But people in this country are very attached to their cars. Yeah, actually, I think everywhere in the world people are attached to their cars. It was interesting. When I was in Singapore, I asked one person, because the people there, they keep their cars immaculate. It's not like in this country where the car is like filthy and filled with junk, you know. In Singapore, you get into anybody's car, it is immaculate. Not only tidy, but free from dirt. And they wash their cars every day. It's just incredible. And I asked somebody, why, you know, why like this? And they said, well, in our country, you don't usually invite your friends over to your house. People don't have the custom so much of meeting at somebody's house. They'll meet rather outdoors at a restaurant, or, you know, somewhere that's not at somebody's house. So you don't gain any status by having nice things in your house. But if people ride in your car, or they see your car, yeah, then you gain some status. In this country, we do invite people into our houses, but we also are very attached to our cars and get status from our cars, don't we? Yeah. Even if you keep your car a mess, still, you know, here's my messy Volvo, or my messy BMW, or whatever it is. Okay? So it's going to bring a little bit more sting if we're analyzing to look for the car. Okay, so let's go through the 7 points. I'll just list them and then we'll start talking about them. So if a car, and remember this is the example we're going through right now, if a car existed inherently, then a probing consciousness that's analyzing the ultimate should be able to establish it as existing in any one of 7 ways. And it should exist inherently in any of these 7 ways. So, and it should be, this probing consciousness that really investigates the ultimate mode of existence, it should be able to see this. Yeah? So, what are the 7 alternatives for how it should be able to find the I if it were inherently existent? One is that it's one with its parts. Second is that it's different from its parts. Third is that it possesses its parts. Fourth is that it's dependent upon its parts. Fifth is it is what its parts depend upon. Okay, so it's what its parts depend upon. The 6th is that it's the collection of the parts. And the 7th is that it's the shape or the arrangement of the parts. So now we start to investigate. Okay? And in investigating these 7 ways, all sorts of interesting things come up, and we'll have a few sidetracks here and there of quite interesting points. Now, before getting into that, what I want to do is just explain a little bit about these words one and different, or same and separate, or distinct, or sometimes it's translated as one and many. Okay? And sometimes different teachers will use these words in it's chik dung tade in Tibetan. So chik means one, or it can mean the same, and tade can mean different or distinct or several, many. So there's different ways. Okay, so we have to understand a little bit about relationships here. And I want this to be clarifying and not confusing. Yeah? So if things are one, if they're inherently one especially, it means they're one and the same. They're exactly the same. Yeah? If things are different, it just means on a conventional level that they're distinct. The telephone is distinct from the recorder. They're different. Yeah? Now, if you say one nature and different natures, then there's a different meaning. Okay? For things to be one nature, they have to exist at the same time, and one cannot exist without the other existing. So it's saying things are one nature is indicating a particular kind of relationship. Okay? So, for example, the peach and the skin of the peach, or I should say the skin of the peach is one nature with the peach. Because if you have the skin of the peach, you have the peach, and vice versa. Okay? Yeah? Or the color of the peach is one nature with the peach. Okay? But the color and the peach are not one. They're one nature, but they're not one. Because to be one, they have to be exactly the same. And the color and the peach are not exactly the same, are they? Okay, but they are one nature, because you can't have the color without having the peach. You can't have the peach without having the color of the peach. Okay, different, yeah. Two things can be different, like the color of the peach and the peach are different, but they're not different natures. Okay? Because if they were different natures, they could exist at different times, or even if they existed at the same time, they don't need to have any relationship to each other. Like the table and the recorder exist at the same time, but they're different. Okay? And they're also different natures. The table and the tape recorder are different, and they're different natures. Okay? Now we get into certain things like the two truths are one nature, but they're nominally different. Yeah? Ultimate truth and conventional truth are not the same thing. But they are one nature, because you can't have one without having the other. And they depend on each other. So sometimes when some teachers present this, they do the analysis just as one and different. Sometimes they do it as one nature and different natures. And sometimes they do it as one and many in a numerical way. So the self is one, the aggregates are many. Okay? Just so you know, in case you meet this kind of situation, somebody explaining it slightly differently. Here we're going to talk specifically about things being one and different. Yeah? But we will, in the process, get into talking about things that are one nature and different natures. Let's look at the example of the car and the parts of the car. Well, actually, maybe we better pause here because we're almost out of time and start this next time and see if you have any questions right now.
I have a question back at the beginning.
Yeah.
This always puzzles me. In the three ways of apprehending things, of apprehending things as truly existent or apprehending things as neither. If we're apprehending things as truly existent, or grasping, does that mean an afflictive emotion is always present when that grasping is taking place?
Okay, so the question is, when we're apprehending something or grasping something as truly existent, is an affliction present? That grasping at true existence is ignorance.
That's the afflictive ignorance.
Yes.
So the wrong conception, the thing that makes us see things as erroneous.
As erroneous or as false?
No, as the thing that sees the appearance as that incorrect view.
Mistaken.
Mistaken, that's the word, yeah. So what is that ignorance?
Okay, the appearance of true existence is a cognitive obscuration.
Okay.
It's not a consciousness. Yeah, and it arises due to the latencies of ignorance on the mind stream. But it's what obscures full enlightenment. The grasping at true existence is a consciousness, and it's what prevents liberation and causes samsara.
It is an obscuration, it is not a consciousness. That's what
afflictive ignorance is a consciousness.
Yes.
In the three kinds of impermanent phenomena of form, consciousness, and abstract composite, it falls in the category of consciousness.
Yes.
When we're talking about the two obscurations, what prevents liberation and what prevents enlightenment, the ignorance falls in the first one, the afflictive obscurations. And afflictive obscurations include all these afflictions, which are consciousnesses, the seeds of the afflictions, which are abstract composites, and the karmic seeds that cause rebirth in samsara, which are also abstract composites. The cognitive obscurations, that's the ones that you eliminate after the afflictive ones, those are like the appearance of duality, the appearance of true existence, and those arise, those and the latencies of ignorance are what are the cognitive obscurations. And both the latencies and the appearance of true existence are abstract composites. Okay?
Yes.
You got it?
Well, I think so. I mean, it helps. I always thought that was also an ignorance, so
No, the cognitive obscurations are not ignorance.
that's really helpful.
Okay, for the lower schools, maybe this is where you got confused, for the Svatantrika Madhyamikas and the Chittamadrans, the cognitive obscurations are consciousness. And so they differentiate an afflicted ignorance and a non-afflicted ignorance, saying that the afflicted ignorance is grasping at a self-sufficient, substantially existent person, and for the Chittamadrans, the afflictive ignorance is grasping that subject and object arise from different seeds, or that things exist as the reference of their titles by way of their own characteristics. And for the Svatantrika Madhyamikas, the cognitive obscurations are the grasping at true existence, which is because remember the Svatantrikas say that you just need to negate self-sufficient, substantially existent person to be free of samsara. Okay, so the way the Prasangikas state the afflictive and cognitive obscurations is unique. It's not like the other schools. And And if it seems like a lot of names and terms, that's what it seems like at the beginning. But as you get to understand what these names and terms mean and what they're pointing at and identifying these things in your own experience, it becomes quite interesting. Yeah, and it is actually related. It's not just intellectual gibberish. It's actually a core issue for liberation and enlightenment.